a little bit about the organization. Alrighty, so we're getting ready to start right now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paula Edgar, and I'm the president of the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. And I'd like to welcome you to MBBA Learns, our webinar on nonprofit board service for impact and brand development. We have a wonderful panel of folks for you to hear from today, and I'm glad that you're able to join us. Before we get started in terms of the content of the webinar, I start each of these programs with some background about the MBBA and a little bit about what's going on with the organization now. So if you take a look at your screens, I'll walk you through a few things. Oops, I don't know what just happened. Okay. Oops. Pretend you don't see anything. Okay. Okay. So this is me, as I mentioned, and in addition to being the president of the MBBA, I'm also the owner and principal of my own consulting firm where I do professional development workshops, speaking. I also do executive coaching and consulting primarily in the areas of diversity and inclusion and social media strategy. I do hope that you will connect with me via my website as well as on Twitter and LinkedIn. And let's get started talking about the MBBA. So under the first year of my presidency, we really sort of focus on the 4 Ps, and they are pipeline, professional development, presence, and partnership. And the purpose of the pipeline piece was really to connect with students for sponsorships, scholarships, interacting, engaging with schools, and really connecting, dealing with students and that relationship and making sure that they see themselves and us as attorneys and see that they can be us. And so we started off with a backpack giveaway for elementary school students, and we ended up giving away 3 scholarships to law students as well as 3 scholarships for LSAT prep for pre-law students, and we will be doing more of that this year. Under professional development, it really was my thought that our members really needed to have much more engagement with us in terms of helping them along their profession, whether that meant they were in firms or solo practitioners, working for nonprofits, or sort of running the gamut. And so we have added more CLEs. We've done this where we have webinars and other methods of having training other than in person. In terms of presence, you'll see that most of the things that we do with the MBBA now includes some sort of social media engagement to really connect with the fact that we are in 2017 and that we should be connected both online and in person, and really making sure that the brand of the organization is clear and fully developed to show who we are as an organization, who our members are, and what the impact we want to have on our community is. And then finally, we have partnerships. And under here, we have partnerships with organizations such as CUP and Robin Hood, who we have partnering with today on our webinar, but also URI, who they help victims of domestic violence and their pets. Catalyst Network is one of our pipeline partners. Legal Outreach, again, pipeline. And then the word partnership has a sort of dual meaning for us, because the other part of partnership for us is wanting to make sure that more of our Black attorneys become partners in law firms. And so we have an initiative that allows our partners to, or folks who are on the track to become partners, to get development, to have mentors, and to also have the opportunity to interact with general counsel on an intimate basis so that they can have the ability to pitch for business and to engage in order to build their practice and their book of business. So the MBBA has the sections and committees that are listed on the page, and over the summer we'll be adding several more, including a section on, what is the word? A section on working within law firms as, but not practicing. And we're looking forward to having your input on other places where you feel like there are missing topics that you'd like the MBBA to be more impactful in and to have more of a presence in. And I'll just warn you that if you volunteer something, we're likely going to ask you to be a part of it. So raise your hand with suggestions, and also hopefully with the spirit of volunteerism. But in order for us to run the organization, period, we really do need for you all to connect not just as supporters, but as members. And so I will ask you, if you have not yet renewed your membership, or if you're joining us today as a supporter and not a member, that we encourage you to go to our website, mbbanyc.org, to join or renew, so that we can have you amongst our membership ranks. And I'll let you know as we go forward post June 30th, there'll be a lot more member-only opportunities for our members, and a lot of discounts on things that have a cost associated with them for our members, in order to really differentiate that value proposition for our members versus our supporters. In terms of upcoming events, on June 19th, we have our annual golf outing, where not just golf, but we also have swimming, we have a spades tournament. There's just generally good networking, and that's at the Paramount Country Club in New City, New York. You can go to golfmbba.com to sign up. And, you know, last year I went for the first time and realized that even though I couldn't golf, I could still have a good time. So I encourage you to join us. It really is a great venue for networking and connecting with our members and supporters. Then, also upcoming on Wednesday, June 28th, is CUP, which is the Council of Urban Professionals, their 10th anniversary celebration. I'm a proud member, speaking of civic engagement, of the CUP Alumni Board. I was a CUP Fellow in 2015, and I hope to see you all here on Wednesday, June 28th at the anniversary celebration, and letting you know that there will also be an after party. So please do come to the gala as well as the event. And then our final membership meeting of the year will be in June. We are finalizing the date and location this week, so we will provide that to our members as soon as we have that information. And the meeting is not just for people who are currently members, but for folks who are interested in becoming members of the organization as well. So that's enough about me and the MBBA, and we'll get to what we're here for today, which is to learn about nonprofit board service for impact and brand development. And I'll just let you know in terms of logistics, as we are talking, and I will be asking questions to the two panelists that we have on the line. If you have questions, you can use the question function on the on your dashboard in order to ask the questions, and I'll read them out loud and ask for our panelists to respond. And then you can also use the chat function as well. However, for questions, I think it's easier to do the question part of this. There are 3 handouts within the space. One is a handout that has the bios of our 2 panelists. Another one is a board placement program overview from Robin Hood. And the third is a document called the NYC Good Governance document, which is something that was produced in collaboration with a bunch of organizations as well as New York City. So you should download those handouts as well and take a look at them. And now we will get started. I'm going to actually ask for you to respond to a poll prior to us having our panelists introduce themselves, so we can see sort of where you are and if you are currently serving on a board. So if you would just respond to this poll that is on your screen right now, we'll be able to tell where you all are in the process in terms of board service. Okay, we've got 71% of you voted. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll and share it with you. So you'll see that 67% of you are no, you're currently serving on a board. 33% have said yes, and so good. That means that you're coming to learn about the process, which is why we're doing this program. So wonderful. Okay. Our first panelist is Sarah Najarian, who is the Director of Governance and Board Placement at Robin Hood. And Sarah, would you please introduce yourself, give our attendees your background, and tell us a little bit about Robin Hood?
Hi, yes, thanks so much. I'm delighted to be here with all of you. So I'm Sarah Najarian, and I've been with Robinhood for about 5.5 years now, largely focused on our management assistance work and governance and board placement, as well as some development work. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Robinhood is a poverty-fighting organization. We are focused exclusively on the 5 boroughs of New York City. And since the late 80s when we were founded, we've raised and helped to distribute about $2.5 billion to some of the most effective programs and services whose missions are to help our neighbors in need to build better lives for themselves and their families. We recently had a leadership transition, so our long-serving executive director, David Saltzman, stepped down from that role and has joined our own board of directors. And later this month, we'll welcome a new CEO, Wes Moore, will be joining us. So he's transitioning out of the organization he founded in Baltimore. And we'll be moving up here to New York to help us to expand and grow this work. So we distribute about $130 million a year to about 200 plus nonprofit organizations in the 5 boroughs of New York. And in addition to that grant making, we also provide management assistance, which is management expertise and resources to help these organizations get even better at delivering on their mission. It's the capacity building work. And my piece of that, it takes a lot of forms. It could be finance or real estate or strategy, certainly legal. My piece of that is focused on governance. So helping our organizations to get even better at growing, orienting, and putting their boards to work. And on the other side, it's helping to find smart, talented people like all of you to serve on the boards of the organizations that we fund, help them build that bench and bring intellectual capital to their boardroom tables. So that's my role here at Robinhood.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're happy to have you on our webinar. And next, we have Avi Tamir, who is the Managing Director at the CUP Leadership Institute. Avi, would you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about CUP, please?
Sure. Thrilled to be here with you all today. My name is Avi Tamir. As Paula mentioned, I am the Managing Director of the Council of Urban Professionals Leadership Institute. For those who aren't familiar, CUP is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to connect, empower, and mobilize the next generation of diverse business and civic leaders. And I really think I might hijack Paula's 4 Ps because that is exactly what we do as well in terms of, advancing the pipeline, focusing on professional development, ensuring that our members and corporate partners have a presence in the community, and maintaining strong partnerships across all sectors. So I think, Paula, I might use that from time to time, but we're really focused on increasing the social and human capital of our membership, and we do that through a series of workshops, keynote conversations, and networking events throughout the year. And one of our programs is our A Seat at the Table board matching initiative, where we work with about 65 nonprofits in the tri-state area, as well as New York City's head of appointments, to put our members on nonprofit and public sector boards. And then we partner with about 75 corporate partners to offer our membership opportunities to train and workshop around good governance topics, so fundraising, understanding fiduciary responsibilities, and other things that we'll talk about today. Me personally, I've been with CUP for about 4.5 years. Also started my relationship with CUP as a client coming over from Morgan Stanley, and currently working with them on some board matching services as well. So kind of coming full circle for me.
Wonderful. All righty, so let's get started. On your screen right now, you'll see a slide that was kindly provided to us by Robinhood about board member roles and responsibilities. We're not going to sort of follow this generally, but I thought it would be a good hold screen for you all to look at while we have the conversation, where I'll ask questions about board service. So thinking about, wanting to be on a board, and I think a lot of folks want to figure out sort of what kind of board should I be on, right? And so the question that I have for you, and I'll start with you, Sarah, is if I'm looking for a board, what should I be looking for and thinking about the right kind of board to sit on?
Yeah, and For the groups in Robin Hood's network, we're often thinking about issue areas that people are going to be passionate about. For some, it's going to be membership organizations where there's a relevant connection, but the way we usually think about it is finding the issue areas that really resonate with you. What are you passionate about? And then where might your skills fit in to advance the mission of that organization? So there are some great board matching programs around the city that can help you figure this out. And sometimes it's just carving an hour out to have a talk with a friend or a colleague, another member of MBBA, to talk through what are some of the experiences I've had volunteering, my time, maybe it's been through pro bono work. What are the things that I've felt a real connection with, and then how might I apply my skills to help to advance that mission? And as you look at different organizations and try to assess whether or not it's a fit, some of the things you want to look at are, what's the mission? What are the programs that are offered? How do organizations measure the effectiveness of those programs? What is the financial condition of the organization? Take a good look at the 990s. What's the legal condition of the organization? All of you are well equipped to assess that. Think about what the board structure is. What are the responsibilities? How often do they meet? Where do they meet? What's the giving and getting requirement? So be honest with yourself. What's the time commitment you can make? What's your personal capacity to give? How comfortable do you feel with fundraising? And then think about what's the board's relationship to the staff or to the clients. What type of engagement are you looking for? Is it 4 meetings a year? Do you want to be able to volunteer as well? Would you like to be client-facing some of the time? So what's the type of engagement you're looking for, and can an organization offer that to you? And is it a good fit with your passion and the skills that you're coming to the table with? Well, that's a good starting point.
That's great. Avi, when we had our CUP fellow class about board engagement, one of the things that really resonated for me was that the consultant who spoke said that we should be going into the process with our own priorities as the forefront, and then see what organizations fit with that. And I think a lot of us had an eye-open experience then, because we had been just kind of, looking at organizations and find out where we fit, as opposed to the other way around, sort of like dating, right? And so I wanted to think, in addition to anything that Sarah said about what you're looking for, and what questions should you ask if you wanted to add anything about that process.
Yeah, so I mean, absolutely, I would agree with everything that Sarah mentioned, but something also to consider on top of, you should always start with the mission, and if you don't personally have a connection to or care about the mission, your tenure on the board will not be very long, so always want to start with the mission. But for example, if you are passionate about, children and education, there are countless organizations in the city of New York that address that kind of impact area. So how do you narrow down from there? Something for folks to consider is really understanding organizational life cycles and where you can bring the greatest value. So for newer nonprofits in years 0 to 2, they're really focused on their purpose to exist, confirming some assumptions, basic operating systems and metrics, really understanding foundational and doing some analysis there. So if you are an analytical, you might be interested in being involved with a nonprofit in its infancy. But if you're someone who's more of a strategic planner, you're interested in growth and infrastructure, really understanding measures of success, you should look at a nonprofit that perhaps has 5 years under its belt already. Or if you're more visionary, you might be interested in being with a nonprofit that's well established, 10 plus years, is really doing a mission review, understanding that they have to elevate their goals, move to kind of endowing the future. So if that's something that you're more interested in, then you should look at an organization that's been around for 10 plus years. So you can dig a little deeper as you understand what your value is and what your interests are in terms of making an impact on the organization. Think about where the organization is in its life cycle.
That's all great feedback. At this time, and for all of you who are on the phone, you should know that We have an open call right now for MBBA board members. We have 6 board positions that we are looking to fill before the fall. And one of the things that I require after we have had some vetting from our nominations committee is to meet with each of the people who have expressed an interest in wanting to be on the board, because it's important for me as a leader of the organization to be able to talk about expectations and to be able to field any questions so that there's not any questions or concerns that come up later regarding expectations as a director. And so our next question is really, what is the expectations of a board member? Sarah, you mentioned the term give or get, and while I think it's a term of art within our, our hood, maybe explain what that means and talk about the time commitment and what's expected in terms of dollars and time a little bit more, please.
Sure. Yeah, so give or get, what we mean by that is the give is what you can personally contribute annually, and the get is what you can help to raise. Some organizations will have a personally significant give or get policy. Others might have a set number where they might say a minimum $5,000 give or get. So it's important to be in that conversation early, even though it's uncomfortable to have conversations about money. So you understand what the requirements are for that board, and you wind up in a place where you feel really comfortable with what you have to personally contribute and what you need to raise. Not all organizations have a fundraising or a personal commitment requirement, although in my experience, many to most do. But that's not the main point of board service unless you're on an advisory board or development committee. The purpose is actually much broader than that. So as far as time goes, boards typically meet 4 to 6 times a year, but it will depend on the organization. So it's often 4 to 6 times per year for 2 to 3 hours on a weekday evening in person. Some organizations choose to meet on location where they offer services, while others might want to host a meeting, for example, at your offices. Most groups do require committee work. As Avi referenced, organizations might be at different stages. So organizations that are established are likely going to have boards that require committee work, because once you get more than 12 people around the table, it's really hard for anyone to feel particularly accountable for the different pieces of work. So the work gets chunked out into committees. It could be a finance committee, a risk assessment committee, a program committee. Those often meet over the phone. Sometimes they meet in person, but it's often by conference call and typically in the lead up to a board meeting. So again, it's another chunk of time that you'll need to account for in your schedule. And there are often events. Some of them will be fundraising events where you might serve on a host committee, you might personally join the host committee, or you might bring your company in to get involved. And then there are non-fundraising events, which are often wonderful opportunities to expose those in your network to the work of the organization without there being an immediate financial ask. So it can be a wonderful way to bring people in, see whether or not they're engaged, and see if there's then a next step for them. So when I see things go wrong after I've helped to place someone on a board, it's almost always around the time or the financial commitment. So have the conversations up front about that. Many groups will have a board prospectus or a board job description that will spell out what those things are. Not all of them do, and even the ones that do aren't always entirely candid about the amount of time they're looking for. So it's good to have candid conversations, knowing how busy all of you are. And a lot of the work of the board, well, some of it will happen offline, but a lot of it is about coming prepared to the board meetings to have robust conversations about the content of the work, about the financials of the organization, about the strategic planning process for the organization. So you're bringing your experiences, your work experiences, your personal experiences to the table. One thing we see is that people sometimes leave their business hats or their work hats outside of the boardroom. You want to bring your full self to the boardroom and apply all the amazing smarts that people in your field have, right? The risk assessment, the thought partnership. These are the kinds of things that executive directors in Robin Hood's network say to me they're looking for when they talk about wanting people around the table with a legal background. So that's a piece of what should be expected.
That's helpful, because I know that in the questions that I prepared, I didn't actually speak about or have a question about lawyers on boards, but I will we'll talk about my experience. I'm on 6 boards, and I'm not a lawyer on any of them except for MBBA, which is, because of the nature of the organization, we're all lawyers. But you want to be very careful when you're having conversations with potential, board placement about what they're expecting from you. There's a term called fiduciary duty that we all learned in law school, which talks about your responsibility to act in a certain way and to protect the entity as well as yourself when you're engaging. And so you want to make sure that while you're bringing your smarts and your intuitive mind and all the skills that we kind of learn as a lawyer, that there's not an expectation that you serve as the lawyer on the board unless that's something that that you have discussed before. And generally, it's a best practice that boards engage outside folks as opposed to having a board member serve as a lawyer, just because of the fact that it can become a little messy. But they do want to have the ability to have someone who has a legal background to advise in places where they may not, sort of want to go outside, but not to represent, right? So it can become an interesting line, and where I've seen some things go wrong with some of folks who I know who have been on board is where there's an expectation that you actually lawyer for the organization, and actually most organizations that have D&O insurance, which is directors and office insurance, and they should have that, they indicate that you should not be serving in that role on that board. So I would say to make sure you're asking those questions and being very clear about what your expectation is and what you're bringing to the table, so that there's not any confusion around that. But Avi, I wanted to ask you other things that you might have sort of heard and received feedback on regarding when things don't go right in terms of board services, where folks don't ask questions, or how they can go wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that at CUP we really encourage our members who are exploring board service to do is to ask directly about common board problems. So ask directly about any experience of founder syndrome, which is when the organization gets to a certain point, but the founder who started the organization kind of is having a tough time letting go of the reins. Or ask directly about mission creep, which is when, the organization is moving away from its intended mission. Or ask directly about the organization's micromanagement instead of strategic monitoring. So I think the best way to avoid some of those challenges is just to proactively ask about those issues, and not just to the nominating committee chair and not just to the board chair, but to the staff, to the constituents, to anybody who touches and feels the organization, to get the most holistic and realistic response about how the organization shows up to the community. So, I mean, we always say just be really intentional about being upfront with those issues, and that will show the nominations committee or whoever's making the final decision that you care enough about the organization to ask those questions. I think some people may be hesitant to do that because they don't want to appear difficult, or they're really interested in being on the board, so they want to kind of pacify whoever it is that's making the decision, but you're doing yourself and the organization a disservice by not asking those difficult questions. And then the other thing that I would just add to that is I think that a lot of times board members get caught up in what's being asked of them and not remembering that at all times you are a champion and ambassador of that organization. So, and Paul has taught me this well, if you're introducing yourself, are you introducing yourself as VP at Goldman Sachs, or are you introducing yourself as VP at Goldman Sachs and board chair of the Council of Urban Professionals? So always putting that role as part of who you are not only shows to the person that you're talking to that you are a leader outside of your day-to-day job, but also just encourages people to learn more about the organization that you're so committed and passionate about.
That's a perfect tee up to sort of shifting the conversation to the board service and brand development. In Avi's right, it's very important, I think, to align who you are and the fact that you have a following and people think of you highly generally and care about what you affiliate with in order to use that to the benefit of the organizations that you're involved in. And so when you think about how you promote yourself, not just in person when you introduce yourself, as Avi mentioned, but online. Is your LinkedIn updated with your board service? If you have a personal business card, is your board service on there? Even within the signature of your email, having an affiliation there that will allow, and have it hyperlinked so that folks can find out immediately about whatever organization you choose to highlight at that point, is an important thing that you can really help by just having your affiliation. So this is passive things that just allow kind of the light of you and who you are to shine on the organization, which is, I think, the best part about board membership, right, is that people trust who you are and that you are committed about something, and folks will follow you and what you are passionate about because it's you. And so if you're not using that to the benefit of the organizations that you're involved in, you're really doing them and yourself a disservice. Which sort of leads to the point of, what are the benefits, both personally and professionally, of serving on a board? How can you leverage board service to enhance your brand development? And I'll toss that to Sarah, and then I want Avi to sort of to add anything she'd like to add after that.
Terrific. Yes, we think about it as board services an honor. It's also a responsibility, but it can also be very personally fulfilling. And like Avi said, it's finding the mission that really resonates with you and aligning yourself with that mission and becoming an advocate and an ambassador for that organization. So many of the people I meet with who are interested in nonprofit board service, that's the lead for them, but it's certainly also about building your personal network, potentially making business connections on those boards, all while doing the good work of advancing the mission of the organization. And it's completely fine for there to be multiple reasons for you to decide to go ahead and join a nonprofit board. Many of our corporate partners will identify rising stars in their ranks, and those are the people that the corporate partners want to support in joining boards because of the leadership skills that people will develop, as well as for having their own corporate brand identity aligned with the missions of some of these wonderful organizations. And then for the individual, it's about having your personal brand, just as Paula said, aligned with the work and the mission of this organization. So it's typical, and it's also, I think, exactly right to have a number of reasons for becoming involved in that way. And then just a little bit about, once you join a board, you start as a director, but there are often ways to get more involved and take on responsibility and leadership opportunities pretty quickly. From joining a committee, as I mentioned, some of the work gets chunked out into committees. Join a committee. Maybe it's a committee you feel really comfortable serving on. Maybe it's one that's going to allow you to stretch. If you're not feeling super comfortable with financials, maybe you join the finance committee to really up your skill set there. Over time, each committee has a chair, so over time you could grow into a chair of a committee. And eventually think about becoming an officer of the board, a treasurer, a co-chair, a secretary, a chair. Many organizations don't do enough around bench building for the officer roles, and so it's wonderful if you can come in sort of with your eye on that leadership opportunity and figure out how you need to build your skills in order to take on a role like that, a real wonderful leadership role on a nonprofit board. And then you bring those leadership skills back to your day job. It works out well all around.
Absolutely. Avi, did you want to add anything about utilizing board service to develop your brand?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I would agree with what Sarah said, and I think so often professionals of color and women don't get the opportunity to exercise their leadership in the time that they deserve. And so board service is really a place for you to exercise that leadership, test out different styles, different techniques, bring that back to the workplace, show your employer that you have the capacity. And so I think it's just a really important opportunity to do that, especially for demographics that are not always advanced in the time that they're deserving of. And I would also say that in terms of taking on additional responsibility, I think what happens so often is that board members are so committed to the mission that they can sometimes overpromise and underdeliver. And I think to advance in terms of from member to officer, it's so important for you to be reliable and realistic about what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. And really just be, have that level of self-awareness to know what's possible and not. And also, instead of course, time is finite and we can't expand upon that, but we can manage our energy and practicing, strategies for energy management as opposed to trying to expand your time, which is obviously beyond 24 hours plus that you've already committed to other things.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to expand time.
Paula, you have like 48 hours and 24. I don't know how.
Yeah, I've cloned myself, and no one knows it yet. One of the things you brought up was about having additional opportunity to learn skills and enhance skills in the nonprofit space that can lead back to, it being seen at your job. I'll also say, the work that I do as an executive coach, I see a lot of folks using their nonprofit and civic engagement in order to fill in their resume where they don't have skills or don't have opportunity to utilize skills in the workplace, but they can use them or enhance them in a nonprofit space to enable to show them a sort of complete profile when looking for another position. And so thinking about your professional brand, using this can be really wonderful, particularly leadership and opportunities to work with staff and to lead initiatives. You may not be able to do that at work, but you can definitely raise your hand and do that within a nonprofit space if there's room at the place that you're trying to engage with. And that will really have you sort of not have a different persona, but have a better and more enhanced brand in total that you can use to leverage a lot of other opportunities. And it's something else, I can't remember which one of you said it, but about the fact that corporate folks will look at nonprofit work too. I have found that to be very, very true. So sort of a lot of entrees that I've received and had in the corporate space that I would never have had from my work, I've gotten because of the volunteerism that I've done on nonprofit boards. And so I encourage everyone, and particularly folks who are my clients, to be strategic about what you're doing, right? So when you think about the organization that you're looking to engage with and perhaps become on the board, how can you be of assistance to them? How can you add value to them? And then how can affiliating yourself with them enhance your brand? And not just sort of, lofty, like, I'll be making the world better, which is fantastic, but really actual tangible things. Like, if I am affiliated with this organization, I will have access to these 30 board members who are, in places that I would like to be in. And that networking will help me to, get access to X, Y, and Z. And so, Avi, I know that this is something that CUP really tries to sort of promote in that thinking, and actually having fellows and board members, as well as folks who are in the Leadership Institute, think strategically about this connection. So I thought you could talk a little bit more about the networking piece of board connectivity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something that's related to what we've been talking about, but in addition to, is just the opportunity for business development on boards. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for attorneys and lawyers to build their book of business through board service and just being exposed to not only other people on the board who are of influence in their organizations where they work, but also the network that you will gain through the extended network that you create through folks that you serve with. So I think that there's tremendous opportunity for business development through board service, and knowing that it can't be passive. If that is a goal of yours on a board to really expand your book of business, to be intentional about that. Always be talking about what it is that you do in your professional life, so that when people need a patent attorney, they think of you because you have shared that with them and with your extended network through your board service. So something always to be top of mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I want to remind everyone on the line that we do have the question area on the, I don't even know what you call it, this database place.
The chat.
Tab. But you can ask questions in about 10 minutes. I will open it up for Q&A from the attendees. But prior to doing that, I wanted to ask about resources available to new board members. And I know we talked about sometimes boards have descriptions of what is required of them. And I know that with MBBA, I have a retreat for all of our board members each year. But what are some other resources that either are available within different organizations or generally that people who are new to board membership should be thinking about utilizing? Sarah?
Sure. So here at Robinhood, we offer a training twice a year. It's about an hour and a half, and it's going deep on those 10 basics of nonprofit board service. So that's one option. We'll be hosting our next session on October 25th. So if anyone is interested, please feel free to reach me. I'm happy to have you come to that. Board Source is also a wonderful resource for all things nonprofit governance. They have some free resources. They have some paid resources. But on any governance topic, they are a wonderful go-to. Here at Robinhood, we do use a lot of their resources. We also have an online toolkit that is available to access through the Robinhood website across all the different areas of our management assistance program. So governance is certainly one of them. And they're one-pagers, overviews, sample job descriptions. It's meant to be used. It's not just for the Robinhood network, so please do feel free to tap into the toolkit, and I'm happy to share a link to that as well. And then I know, Avi, you had a few as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one I would say is that Paula mentioned that there is a handout attached to the web room, which is the Good Governance Blueprint, which is a group of about 20 organizations in the New York area put together with New York City Service on what does good governance look like in the nonprofit sector. It's a tremendously helpful guide that you should all take a look at if you have any questions about nonprofits or board service. And also, in addition to that, some of the organizations who are part of the collaboration of putting together that document have some individual resources that could be tremendously helpful. One I'll say is United Way's Board Serve NYC has a lot of interesting information and tidbits on their website. I would also encourage you all to check out Charity Strong. And also, finally, in addition to the blueprint that was put out by a New York City Service, they are rolling out a series of trainings on different sections of the blueprint. And we would be happy to share with you all upcoming dates for those trainings. And there's really helpful information shared in those sessions.
And I'd just say, too, in addition to all these wonderful external resources, for those of you, some of you on a board, as you're joining a board, ask for support and orientation. So some groups have formal ways to orient new board members, many don't. But ask for a sit down with the senior staff, get briefed on the programs, ask for an overview from the CFO or the controller. Another great way to get oriented and understand your role is to ask for a board mentor when you join. Some organizations will offer that, others don't offer it formally, but it's okay to ask. And that can be a wonderful way to have a sounding board as you're getting up to speed, and someone to turn to ask about content as well as board dynamics.
What I will also add to that is that you should also utilize becoming a member of a board to sort of use as a touch for your own network to let folks know, look, I've just joined this board. This is the mission. I look forward to inviting you to events and connecting, and then hopefully that will then lead to your help with fundraising. But what that does is also allow folks to connect with you and say, oh, I'm on a board, similar board, or I'm also on a board. And so if you can't find a board mentor within the actual board that you're serving on, you might be able to find mentorship or resources from other folks in your network who do also serve on boards. And I will just say, as a networking tool, I often go to LinkedIn and check out my network and see what organizations they're affiliated with to because that just adds another sort of intimate touch to the relationship building that you want when you are fostering relationships. So I have another poll that I'd like to launch right now, asking what your intentions are. So when do you think that you want to be on a board? 6 months, within the next year, next 2 to 3 years? What's your thought? Because really, when we talk about that strategy and building a game plan, knowing time frame that you want to work in is helpful as a start, because it can foster that relationship when you're thinking about who you want to reach out to, what organizations, what events you're going to attend. Knowing the time frame is, I think, a really good move. Okay, so this is interesting. So we've got about 75% of the folks who have voted. I'll go ahead and close the poll. And you can see that the majority of you are looking to join a board within the next 6 months, which I think is fantastic timing, because you know, even if the boards you're thinking of are running on an annual year versus the fiscal year that ends on the 30th, there usually is some traction around this time about looking for people to join boards and thinking strategically around who can be on the board next. So this is a good time. The recruitment process for boards, in addition to kind of having board fairs, which you've mentioned, and having folks within your network reach out to you, would you both suggest, if there's a board that or an organization that the attendees are interested in, to actually just start that outward outreach themselves rather than kind of wait for events or something like that? You know, what kind of strategy do you think that they should employ to reach out to the organization?
So this is Avi. I would just say I would absolutely be proactive in reaching out to an organization that you are interested in getting involved with. But what I will say is I think it's fantastic that folks on the line are interested in joining boards in the next 6 months. But just to manage expectation about the cultivation period, I always encourage our members to put in the time up front to volunteer with the organization outside of board service, to ensure that it's an organization that you are committed to being on a board of. So, you know, if you're interested in an organization that you haven't connected with, absolutely reach out to them directly, but understanding that you should spend some time getting to know the organization before you join the board.
Great. I'm going to ask one last question before we go to Q&A, and I have some questions already in the queue from folks who are on the line. So the final question we have on our list is, how should I measure and evaluate my personal contributions to an impact on the board and its mission? And I love this as a question because it really requires self-reflection and also some, you know, feedback. Self-feedback. And so what's the response to that? Sarah, what do you think there? How do you measure and evaluate your contribution?
Sure. So one of the things we help to coach the organizations in our network on is to evaluate board members annually, just like most of us in our day jobs have evaluations and reviews. So it's a wonderful way to talk about your time commitment. Have you been attending meetings? Are you involved in committee work? Are you participating in events? Are you giving and getting at the level that you had intended to? And then, so there's some formal ways that may or may not exist on the boards that you'll join, but it's thinking yourself, are you still passionate about this mission? Are you able to build this into your very busy lives and not feel like it's a burden when a board meeting is coming up or a committee call is coming up? Are you excited to share the work with the people in your network? Are you willing and able to be an advocate and ambassador? Do you want to talk about the work in the organization? And sometimes people will join a board, they'll serve for a 2-year term or 3-year term, or maybe even 2 of those, so 4 to 6 years in. Maybe you'll decide it's time to step down and open up a seat for someone who is newly passionate about this issue area, and for you to find something else. Or maybe you'll say, hey, I really want to see this organization through the next phase or the next strategic plan or this leadership transition. But it is good to check in with yourself as meetings are coming up, as committee work is coming, as an event is coming up, do you still feel excited about your participation? Sometimes there's room to right the ship. If there's something off, it's worth talking to a board chair, an executive director, a governance committee chair, if something isn't resonating with you in a good way. And sometimes it means it's time to step down.
Great. Avi, do you want to add anything?
Please.
Yeah, no, I mean, like usual, I agree with everything Sarah said, but one thing I will add, and it kind of relates to another question you had shared with us earlier about the challenges that people can expect and how to manage that. Especially for CUP, because we're focused on professionals of color, organizations come to us with an interest to diversify their boards, but they are in the period of self-reflection where they're revisiting their board culture and trying to understand why they don't have a more inclusive board and trying to right the ship. And so the one thing I really encourage folks to do is to have a bit of grit or resilience when it comes to kind of staying the course, because for many of you, you may be trailblazers on being the first woman or professional of color to serve on a board. And these organizations have a tremendous interest in kind of correcting that culture, but it might take some time. And that I encourage you all to be open to educating others on the board about that importance of your perspective, and that it might take a year or two for you to feel settled in that role.
That's great. So I'll look at some of the questions that have come in. One of them is, how important is it to have someone on your board who can bring in funding as opposed to having insight to the area of concentration of the organization?
Sure, this is Sarah. The nonprofit boards work best when the right people are around the table, and that means diversity across skills, areas of expertise, background. That means some of the people at the table are going to have connections to funders. Others might be issue area experts. Others are finance folks. Of course, there will be lawyers. So it's important to have a diverse set of perspectives, networks, and skills around the table. So even coming from Robin Hood, where we do raise a lot of money and our board's very focused on that, our latest slate of new board candidates, just recently nominated, 3 of the people are issue area experts, and that was a missing perspective on our board and a really important one to have represented.
That's great. Another question was, what resources are available to find out what organizations are looking for new board members?
So this is Avi. I would say that the organizations that we listed as resources before will have information about nonprofits that are looking for board members, especially Charity Strong, but there are a few others that I would share in addition to what we mentioned before, which are Board Assist and BoardNet USA on top of those others. I think all of them will give you some information about nonprofits who are looking for active and engaged board members.
In addition to Robin Hood and CUP.
And CUP, yeah.
Yep.
I can't believe I didn't mention that.
This is another question. What's the difference between a regular board and an advisory board? Are the fiduciary responsibilities the same, and which is better for building your brand?
Sure. So governing boards do have the fiduciary duty. Advisory boards, especially the way we see them function in groups within Robin Hood's network, they're often the local affiliates of national boards. And the primary responsibility that I've seen of advisory boards is fundraising and friend raising. There are certainly sometimes decision rights that impact the local affiliate here in New York, but really the main purpose is network building within a local market. Is that what you see, Avi?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would add is that for those on the line who do work with nonprofits or are on a board currently, just thinking of the advisory board as the place to grow your engagement of folks who want to be involved as opposed to the governing board. You really shouldn't have a governing board that, the kind of target number might be 9. You should never go over, 20. And sometimes we see governing boards that are 30 plus, when really the opportunity to engage those folks should be on an advisory capacity.
I also see a lot of organizations, and perhaps this is just something that we see in the legal field within bar associations and boards, is that the advisory boards will be former board members, former presidents, or former officers to sort of just stay involved and to have some continuity outside of the board terms. And so I think, to respond to the part of the question that says which is better for building your brand, I think that the building your brand piece is more about how you engage in the work that you do. So if you have an opportunity to be on a regular board or an advisory board, you still need to be adding value, and that's where the brand building comes in, and having ability to utilize your network, your skill set to the advancement of the organization is where you can continue to build and advance your brand within the space, no matter what the board is called, advisory or regular. Another question that has come in is, how many years of experience post-law school do you need to generally apply for board? Either one of you want to answer that? I have a thought, but either one of you want to respond to that? Thoughts?
Yeah, sure. This is Sarah. I often think about it as 10 years out of undergrad, whether you've gone on, which all of you have, to get a graduate degree. It's often 10 years, 8 to 10 years out of undergrad is when is typically who I see for the folks looking to join governing boards or advisory boards, but typically that's around the years of experience that's helpful in joining a governing board, and on up, but 8 to 10 is usually the starting point.
Avi, anything?
Yeah, I think that that's typically what I'm seeing in terms of what the boards are looking for, but what I would add to that is it's never too early to get involved with board service. So there are a lot of organizations that have junior boards or young professional boards that might either be pipelines to the board or not. They might just be a separate group, but I would encourage anyone at any age to get involved in board service from some perspective. And increasingly, I think our nonprofit partners are looking for more and more millennials to onboard onto their boards.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. Both of what you said, 100%. You know, a lot of organizations will have a junior board, which will help to sort of onboard folks who are younger in their profession or in their career. But I will say, I don't think there's a set number of years that you need post-law school or post-school period. It's more about your ability to sell how you will be a value add to the organization, right? So organizations want to bring on folks who will work, right? Who will be able to engage and provide feedback and advice. And they want people who have networks that can give them access to funding, right? And so the likelihood for you having that post undergrad is a little bit lower, but post law school, I think that it's sort of more in place because you've been through school, you have a network from your undergrad, and then you also have a network from your law school. And thinking about the passion that you exhibit around a certain area is also helpful too. So if you have a topic that you're really an expert in, that you can bring to the table that other folks that are on this board don't have, you're showing that there's something else that you can bring that may not be the money or the network, but it is a topic area. So don't count yourself out, and do exactly what was recommended, which is to engage as a volunteer to find out what it means to be a part of the board, so that when they're thinking about people who would be good folks to become board members, you're already right there sort of in the fray already. Another question that just came up, although I'm not really sure the actual, I might be missing a word, is what is a good number for a newly established board? Or maybe, I guess, a good number of folks on a board, a good number of people. What's a good number? I don't know if there's an actual answer to that. What are your thoughts? What's a good number of people on a newly established board?
I think 3 is required by law, but I deferred to the folks on the phone who know that piece better than I do. But it's enough to spread but it's enough to spread the work around. So something to consider for many of you who do have full-time jobs is startup boards are often working boards and may require a much heavier lift around time commitment. So that's something to be really mindful of. So getting enough people around the table with a diverse set of skills, not just people who are friends of the founder and said yes. The right skills, a diverse set of skills to participate is also really helpful, especially in startup mode.
Mm-hmm. A final question that came in is, can a board member also be an officer, and under what circumstances should they not carry both functions?
Yep. So as I understand it, officers are also directors of the board. They're just in the leadership roles. Is that is that the question?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. And I think the part about under what circumstances should they not carry both functions, that depends on the bylaws of the organization. Yeah. And I know this really well because we just revised our bylaws last year where we had non-voting officers and we switched to having voting officers who are all, who are also members of the board. So you have to look at the bylaws, and I would suggest that each of you look at all of the bylaws of any organization that you're interested in becoming involved in. So I want to thank my esteemed panelists for joining us today, and thank all of you for tapping in on the webinar, and I hope that you've learned a lot. We will be sending around an evaluation, so please do give feedback, and again, if you haven't already, please do join the Metropolitan Black Bar Association. Thank you all so much. Bye, Avi, and
Thanks for having us.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Take care.